We'd like to thank the many sponsors of this and other Raven events this year. Poets and Writers is partially supporting this specific event. For Culture of King County, the City of Seattle's Office of Arts and Culture, and the Washington State Arts Commission with NEA funding for our projects. Your moderator today will be Holly Hughes. She is the author of Hold Fast, Sailing by Ravens, and co-author of The Pen, P-E-N, and The Bell, Mindful Writing in a Busy World. And she's the editor of the award-winning anthology Beyond Forgetting, Poetry and Prose about Alzheimer's Disease. Her fine art chapbook, Passings, received an American Book Award from the Before Columbus Foundation in 2017. She's a graduate of Pacific Lutheran University's Low Residency Program, and she taught there, was on the staff for 13 years, in addition to teaching writing at community colleges for several decades. She currently leads writing and mindfulness workshops in Alaska and in the Northwest, and consults as a writing coach. Holly, take it away.
Thank you, Phoebe. I'm Holly Hughes. I'm one of 4 co-curators of the Northwind Reading Series, along with Sheila Bender, Linda Robertson, and I'm co-hosting tonight with Sharon Carter, who will be the first reader. She has a piece in this wonderful anthology. I'm honored to be moderating this reading, bringing together 6 poets from this powerful anthology who all live on or close to the Olympic Peninsula. We're happy to be partnering in this reading with Raven Chronicles Press and the Port Townsend Public Library to celebrate the publication of this important collection, and we hope help get it out into the world. It's harder now during these times to get books out. In these deeply divided times with hate clearly on the rise, we need to hear from our writers and artists, and this timely collection deserves a wide audience. I know Phoebe held this up earlier, but I'm going to hold it up again just so you can see it. From the powerful, evocative cover image to the wide-ranging array of diverse voices, 117 writers and 53 artists, this anthology is a welcome response to the hatred that's been unleashed not only these past 4 years, but which has been undergirding our institution for centuries, as the pieces in the first section, Legacies, make clear. In looking at the table of contents, it's evident how much careful thought went into this collection. It's divided into 5 sections and ends fittingly with resistance. Each section includes powerful epigraphs, and I'll be sharing a few of these too as a counterpoint to the poets' readings. The poets in this collection include our own local luminary, Tess Gallagher, who lives in Port Angeles, as well as other nationally acclaimed poets, Jericho Brown, Marge Percy, Lucille Clifton, Danyez Smith, as well as many well-known and emerging Northwest poets. I really appreciate this collection in Peace March, an ongoing campaign for justice for all the struggles embodied in these writings. So please settle in, listen deeply, and from wherever you're watching tonight, we are together in cyberspace and spirit to witness these important struggles for justice and celebrate these writers speaking up. Thank you for joining us in this Peace March. We hope you'll use the chat to respond to what you're hearing. Just write a little note on the side. And if you have any questions as we go along, we'll be taking questions at the end, as many as we can. With this many, of course, we won't be able to take all of them. And just a reminder that once the reading starts, please turn off your video, and that'll help ensure the quality of the recording for those who can't be with us tonight. So I'm going to start out by introducing our first reader, my colleague with the Northwind Reading Series, Sharon M. Carter. Sharon M. Carter is a poet and visual artist. Originally from Lancashire, she earned a medical degree from Cambridge University, working in both British and American nonprofit healthcare systems. Her work has been published in many literary magazines, anthologies, and online, including Terra Nova, Pontoon, Exhibition, Ars Medica, and the American Lung Association. She was fortunate that Hedgebrook and the Jack Straw Writing Program supported her early in her writing career. She is one of 4 poets curating the Northwind Reading Series. A manuscript entitled Quiver is forthcoming. And I also just want to add that Sharon is multi-talented. She also has 3 pieces of beautiful, powerful art in this anthology. So please welcome Sharon Carter as our first reader.
Thank you, Holly. And thank you, Raven Chronicles, the editors, Anna Balint, Phoebe Bochet, Thomas Hubbard. I'm really honored that my work is included in this important anthology. And thank you everyone for supporting it. I'll begin by reading the poem published in this book. And it's called Un Bâton Rojo, Red Button, for Cece. Each time she looks at the moon, it seems further away. His face stitched to the sky, only a sliver of bone remains. The sun she lost in the desert, escaping to America. Heat and thirst drove the life from him. Sand bleaching the past, night skies thumbtack map, showing someone else's future. 2 empty dippers, one pointing to El Norte. She searched hospital records, shelters, jails, unclaimed dead, personal effects, an unmatched pants button, sewn before he left, proof, 2 holes, one through each side of her heart. In 2005, I was a staff member on Semester at Sea, which is an around-the-world floating college, and our first port was La Guaira. This poem is called A Taste of Venezuela. Reggaeton blasted from coach speakers as we drove through La Guaira, over 20,000 bodies buried 6 years before in a mudslide. We merged onto the Caracas Highway for a rainforest tour. 36 turns, tunnels, cracked viaducts, one which collapsed the next year. In the city, anti-US sentiment, skeletal Uncle Sam graffiti. Young men glared as we passed by. A cable car raised us 4,000 feet to the national park. Evergreens, pink and purple orchids, a silent jungle. We asked our guide, where are the howler monkeys, sloths, macaws? He confessed the poor had climbed up from the city, eaten every mammal and bird. Later, at the tourist restaurant, all you could eat barbecued beef, dulce con leche, linen tablecloths. I like to hike long-distance footpaths in England, and I wrote this poem on the North Downs Way, which is Farnham to Canterbury. It's called Red-tailed Kites. Red-tailed kites patrol Wiltshire skies. Their silhouette transmits panic. Crows mob, sacrifice one for the good of all. Field mice agitate. Rabbits disappear to a white dot, brains programmed for escape. Just as a woman hiking alone might slide behind tree or dry stone wall to avoid a man. Because of my training, I have an intimate knowledge of bones, and this poem is about uncommon bones. Broken in ball and socket mud on military fronts, blood-bone profits stashed in Swiss bank accounts, festered in diamond mines after the locusts fled, foot bones connected to thigh bones refusing to dance, made England's bone china king of the Wedgwoods, leapt giant strides on a skull moon skin, became fertilizer, grown corn high as an elephant's eye. Dark matter involuting through a bone's black hole. Skulls stacked genocide high in catacombs. Bones pitched from the sky after clouds wept their high-rise tears, clacked louder than the ticking of the doomsday clock. There's a European earthworm. I love the name. It's called Alolobophora, which has been introduced into the United States. And this poem is called Non-Native. Excuse me. Earthworms digest my garden detritus. The same species dug in my back childhood yard for bait. I learned to hook those pale tremblers myself, wait for tugs on my handheld line. We caught eels from the jetty on their journey to mate in Bermuda's Sargasso Sea. I remember the windlash off Morecambe Bay, fish heads, blood. Walking home, the catch dangled like Medusa's scalp from Dad's calloused hand. Caught in the same bay, 23 illegal Chinese cockle pickers were swallowed by incoming tides while paying off their debts. And the last poem is written about our lovely Marine Science Centre Museum in Port Townsend. And that's the title. Clouds lift, brief sun on Cascades' winter summits, Orca's teeth. Researchers say Miocene bears once harvested these beaches. Today, strewn with sea-washed cedars, upended root balls claw air. Shelved, a mammoth tooth, baleen, ribs, and Hope the orca. Her skeleton hangs from roof beams, her charted demise, toxic levels of PCBs, a brucellosis infection. Poor Hope. Outside, children created a lobster from a carbonated soda bottle, beer cap, string. A cassette crab crouches on single-use plastic straws. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sharon. That was so powerful. And that last poem especially reminded me of one of the epigraphs that appears in the collection by Greta Thunberg. And it goes, I want you to feel the fear I feel every day. And then I want you to act. I want you to act as you would in a crisis. I want you to act as if our house is on fire, because it is. Our next reader is Lawrence Matsuda. Lawrence Matsuda was born in the Minidoka, Idaho concentration camp during World War II. He and his family were among the approximately 120,000 Japanese incarcerated. In 2010, his book of poetry entitled A Cold Wind from Idaho, about the World War II forced incarceration of Japanese Americans, was published by Black Lawrence Press. In 2014, his book of poetry, Glimpses of a Forever Foreigner, was released. It was a collaboration between Matsuda and artist Roger Shimomura, who contributed 17 original sketches. In 2016, he and Tess Gallagher collaborated on Boogie Woogie Crisscross, a book of poetry developed from emails they exchanged, where she was in Ireland and he was in Seattle. In 2019, he completed a novel based on his mother's experience entitled My Name is Not Viola. That was published by Endicott and Hughes. Please welcome Larry Matsuda.
Thank you very much. Hello and welcome. Tonight I'm reading two poems from Take a Stand Against Hate. First, I want to thank Phoebe Boucher, Ravens Chronicle editor, Holly Hughes, host, and Sharon Carter, who co-curates the North Wind Reading Series and who also helped publicize this event with Holly. My two poems are short, so I'll take some time to provide a little background and context. First, I was born in the Minidoka, Idaho War Relocation Center, as Holly said, and that was an American concentration camp during World War II. We lived in Block 26, Barracks 2, and my number was 11464D. My poems deal with the topic of the World War II forced incarceration and its effects and lingering after effects. Second, people often ask, why did the forced incarceration take place? Presidents Reagan, Bush Sr., and Clinton stated three causes in their letters of apology: racial discrimination, wartime hysteria, and failed leadership. In comparison today, how are we doing as a country in terms of racial discrimination? Wartime hysteria, which was called propaganda then and now fake news. And finally, failed leadership was the final cause. So my question is, and I don't expect an answer, how far have we come as a country, and how are we doing today? Finally, to understand my first poem, The Noble Thing, the key vocabulary word is shikataganai, which means it can't be helped. The noble thing. Dad never talked about Minidoka. That was a noble thing. Before World War II, there was Garfield High School for him. Ice skating, dances at Lake Wilderness Lodge, later his ownership of Elk Grocery on Seneca Street. He and my mother were married in 1941, 10 months later to be removed, forced into the Minidoka concentration camp. Mom was 5 months pregnant in August with my older brother, Alan. With blackout curtains drawn, the train left Puyallup and climbed the Cascade Mountains until the land flattened and the inescapable sun transformed the train cars into a moving sauna. People gasped small, panic breaths from the superheated air. Shikataganai. It can't be helped. The train stopped by the side of an unmarked road in the Idaho desert, released its passengers miles from any station. Rumors spread they would be shot or marched to death, their bodies stacked, then carted to some awaiting ditch. Nowhere to run, they walk in their best shoes in the gritty sand, as on the face of the moon. The heat caused some to faint as they carried all that they could. 3 years later, Dad returned to Seattle after the war, developed a bleeding ulcer, lost his janitor job at the Ural Hotel. Depression took Mom away like invisible guards. She was a stranger, a stick-like figure with arms and legs poking out of a white smock, pacing the sidewalk next to the Western State Hospital turnaround. Dad never talked about it. None of it. I never heard him say the word Minidoka. Gaman, endure the unbearable with dignity. Shikataganai, my best friend mother, chose pills for suicide. After school, Randy, my neighbor, opened the garage door and found his father in a black suit, his best, hanging by the neck. Shikataganai, the same path other Seattle Japanese chose. Numbers unknown. Shikataganai. We, however, never talked about it. That was a noble thing to do. The second poem is dedicated to Ivanka Trump. The quote, "History does not repeat itself, but it rhymes," is attributed to Mark Twain within the poem. And it is entitled, "Just a Short Note to Say Something You Already Know," for Donald's daughter, Ivanka Trump. Ivanka, in a different time and place, you and your children are squeezed into cattle cars destined for Nazi death camps. Stars pinned to your coats and numbers tattooed to your arms. Religion is your crime, something like the 120,000 Japanese Americans whose race incarcerates them during World War II. If you dodge head shaving and starvation, maybe a country would welcome you. Angel of death is difficult to slip. Unfortunates are turned away, chased by verbal brickbats and pitchforks. You smell freedom's scent, but only glimpse porthole views of Lady Liberty's tantalizing torch. Doors slam and hands of kindness withdraw. You're not among privileged, huddled masses. Today, as a 1% American demographic, you're safe by an accident of birth. Others, less fortunate, however, stand on precipices knowing history does not repeat itself, but it rhymes. When Donald promises a magnificent great wall and spews religious hatred to cheering crowds, you must feel a guilty twinge, knowing that if this were 1943 Germany, a chorus of incendiary voices would echo and push innocents off of slippery cliffs into eternal darkness. Black hole so forbidding victims would never see their children again, while self-serving politicians levitate on bandwagons, swerving on and off a broken highway of 8 million bones. Thank you. Finally, to everyone, thank you for attending. And I would urge you to please vote in November so that among a long list of things, that forcibly incarcerated children are released from cages. Thank you. Good evening.
Oh, thank you, Larry. What a powerful, powerful reading. Thank you for speaking up about this. And this quote from Bertolt Brecht seems apt right now, who said, this is also from the anthology, "People who fight may lose. People who do not fight have already lost." Thank you for reminding us. The next reader is Alice Derry. Alice Derry is the author of 5 volumes of poetry, most recently Hunger from Moonpath Press, along with 3 chapbooks, including translations of poems by Rilke. She taught for 30 years at Peninsula College, where she curated the Foothills Poetry Series, holding 12 to 15 readings per year. Since retirement, she has been active in helping local tribal members access poetry and has taught a number of community workshops. She has also written a number of essays and presented at professional conferences. Raymond Carver chose her first poetry manuscript, Stages of Twilight, for the King County Seattle Arts Prize. Strangers to Their Courage was a finalist for the Washington Book Award. Please welcome Alice Derry.
Hello, everyone. I want to thank, first of all, Holly, Phoebe, and Sharon for their amazing amount of work that they did so that this could happen tonight, and I'm very grateful for that. And to the editors of the anthology for an enormous amount of work, finding all the work and then arranging it. And I'd like to thank my fellow readers, whom I really enjoy reading with and whose work I really admire. Larry, that first poem you read is amazing and really heartfelt. Thank you for that. It is interesting to do this on Zoom. I participated as an audience member in another reading, and I was interested to realize that even though it's not as fun as being together in a room where we can really share those vibes that come to us, it's not bad. We can at least be together, and I really like that a lot. I'm going to read 2 poems tonight. One of them is from the anthology. I do want to point out that the editors were so nice as to put this beautiful photograph by Anne Boleyn right next to my poem, and it really speaks so beautifully to my poem. So thank you so much for that beautiful photograph. This poem, Tender, started with a story that I heard on TV, and then I had been spending some volunteer time working to restore Gary Oak Plantation in Sequim. Gary Oak savannas had been part of the Sequim landscape before contact, and it was an attempt to bring some of that back. And we volunteers, of course, come together as strangers, but over snacks and over time, we get to know each other, and then we start telling our stories. Usually I begin with the personal in a poem like this, or most poems that I write, and then try to draw the global in if I'm able to, as well as I can. So this is Tender. When the men drift away, the women begin to speak their pain, how it keeps them awake nights that their doctors have prescribed this and that. They don't complain, as if suffering rose without cause and infused them, sun soaking this pasture after rain, releasing scent. Around these words, we hover near Sarah's tailgate set with snacks, hands warming on teacups. A pair of ravens tramps through air like solid ground. Eagles building a nest this spring push them farther along the hogback. They're still objecting. Volunteers, we've only known each other these summer weeks, but as we amble back to weed, daylighting the newly planted oak trees, the women's talk like allowance, freeze your story, Rachel. Losing your brother when he was 8, losing your mother's listening then too. Put my ashes there, she told you on your last visit, pointing to the big cedar at the field's edge, where his play was happiest, although you steadied her across the field. No matter how high you hold it, the black salamander you found, green stripe down its 2-inch back, tries to jump from your hand to its grasses and seeps. It's familiar. Something allows the hidden to surface in us, a strike of light or the distraction of small animals, nothing contiguous, except that we guard these moments against indifference, and they pile in jumbled groups, waiting. No child of the 6 in my family died, but our mother left us as surely as yours, her attention fixed elsewhere. What a close family we have, our parents said, annulling any words for absence. The salamander tips from your hand into the grass. I don't tell you that story when you turn for my answer, because all morning a woman's hand has been in front of me from last night's TV. I tell you that a person can refuse to pass on depravity, that tenderness, like the assertion of sun into a field, takes substance as that very moment. Tender, I say, how her body still immobile from injury, the woman reaches her hand to cup the curled head of her toddler, clutching to her blanket, their eyes locked together. How her tenderness to him never ends. 2 days ago, acid was thrown on her. I feel like a corpse, she says through the translator, but for my child, I have to keep on. Jury Duty is from my most recent book, Hunger, which was published in 2018. And I did a short stint on the jury several years ago. I was struck right away, maybe the first person to be struck from the jury on those freebies that the lawyers get. I wasn't welcome on that jury. So anyway, then I thought, well, okay, I couldn't do my jury duty, so I'll write a poem about it instead. So this is Jury Duty. This accused in his crisp blue shirt, slighter than I am, continually running his hand through his dark, cropped hair, would be crushed in prison. I know from my students, freely admitting their guilt, they've written of the violence used against them. He stares into space beside his defense attorney, whose suit is too tight, shoes scuffed. The prosecutor's on her feet, apologizing for taking our last day of summer, grilling us, 19 prospective jurors, about our experiences with drinking and driving. One woman raises her hand, a felony assault. The next explains, my alcoholic husband tried to run me off the road, but he mistook a different car for mine. It was another woman he left to die. A third's nephew has been rendered quadriplegic. I turn from the defendant to their stories, willing to carry them as I'm seated in the box. But the prosecutor strikes me from duty, along with my fellow juror, pushing from behind as we leave, breathing, phew, we got out of that one. Who'd work hard for a guy who refused a breathalyzer test? I drive into my free afternoon. When the prosecutor had asked what could make a person refuse the test, I speculated maybe the policeman didn't treat him well. Just rounding up ideas, keeping Rodney King in mind, or more recently, Henry Louis Gates Jr. All of us, of course, white, in this small town courtroom on our country's western edge. Why didn't I leap to the answer everyone in the room except me seemed to know? So that needing no voice, it rose out of the combined air and fell like a scolding. Only the guilty, those in the fog of drink, would refuse. That I shouldn't be standing on the slippery ground at the crime scene, a night thick with rain or even spangled in stars, forming their sure alliances, while I listened to the talk of two frightened men, one wearing the badge we'd given him. And I want to thank you all for coming and listening. It is a wonderful place to be in this very fraught time in our country, that we can be together with poetry. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Alice. Boy, what powerful poems. That image from Tender of the woman cupping her infant's head has been haunting me all week. Thank you for your powerful words. And thank you for your last comment. This is so important to be able to be together now. So next we have Patrick Dixon. Patrick Dixon is a writer and photographer, retired from careers in teaching and commercial fishing. A member of the Olympia Poetry Network Board of Directors, he's been published in several literary journals, including Cirque, Oberon, The Raven Chronicles, The Tishman Review, and the anthologies Fish 2015 and Washington 129, or I guess it's called WA 129. He is the poetry editor of National Fisherman Magazine's quarterly North Pacific Focus. A member of the Fisher Poet Gathering Organizing Committee, Mr. Dixon received an Artist Trust grant to edit Anchored in Deep Water, the Fisher Poets Anthology, published in 2014, which is a really beautiful anthology, by the way. His chapbook, Arc of Visibility, won the 2015 Alabama State Poetry Morris Memorial Award, and he lives in Olympia, Washington. Please welcome Pat Dixon.
Thank you, Holly. I'd like to thank you and Phoebe and Raven Chronicles for including me in the anthology, and it's an honor to be here and to be reading with such wonderful poets. The readings so far have just been outstanding and inspiring. So this first poem, I have 4 poems tonight, and this first poem is called Safe Practice. It's spring, and outside, a man leans over a gun, checking to see if it's loaded. Responsibly, he raises it to point at treetops in the distance, toward the field, away from houses, at a space as empty as the sky. He pulls the trigger, and the hammer slams into the back of a bullet with a roar of fire, smoke, and noise. 8 grams of lead catapults across the field, over new shoots of alfalfa, over rabbits and mice, startling swallows overhead, whistling past flowers, bees, flies, and mosquitoes, over frogs at the edge of puddles, salamanders, black-headed juncos, until an alarmed crow, black as the brightest night, cawing a warning to the world, flies into its path without seeing, without knowing what just blew through its breast and out its back in a dark cloud of blood and feathers, spiraling to the ground. Relieved that he had been so cautious with a firearm he thought it was empty, the man ejects the clip, puts the gun inside its case, closes and locks it, thinking, you can't be too careful. I do want to clarify, I'm not against guns, but I do often feel that too many of us humans see them as a solution instead of a problem. And I think our American culture is demonstrating how much that isn't the case. And that includes our own government. The next poem is about that and was written during the Obama administration, ironically enough. It's the poem that's in the anthology. It's called Men of a Military Age, which is the US Army's designation for certain non-combatants in a war zone. Excuse me. The noise is unmistakable, like the way a helicopter announces its presence long before it's visible. Look up. The speck you see seems harmless enough. A light buzz in your brain signals maybe you're wrong about that. Run. Seek cover. All the destruction a tornado offers packed into a cylinder beneath a wing. The eye and the nose follows your steps, places a crosshair. Or another, flying so high no one on the ground hears until the trigger's pulled and everything goes white. Walls, chairs, tables leap and fragment, mix with flesh and blood. Amazon doesn't deliver this way, yet. The UPS truck idling on the street outside your house hasn't exploded, erasing your neighborhood in a cloud of smoke and thunder. But standing outside in the city heat, music thumping to the beat of bullets pumped from a casino window, the result is the same, only the bodies fall intact, not blown apart into crimson spatter. FedEx arrives in an ambulance, leaves a door sticker, no replacements, ever. What's next? USPS carriers, once gone postal, now wearing Kevlar, delivering assault rifles, ammunition? Meanwhile, another drone takes off from an airfield, heads toward Pakistan, looking for men of a military age. I suppose it's easy to point fingers. I think it's harder to look in the mirror. The next 2 poems are more personal. This one's called Reconciliation. These days, the news is full of spite. I admit to being a contributor. I hate what is happening. Am filled with my own intolerance of rabid dog patriot militias, and I despise this president and all he stands for. I've seen better. I thought naively we were better. And sometimes, I admit, I descend into the stench of social media with vigor, determined to make my point loud and convincing. I am completely aware I change no minds. I know I piss people off, and I choose not to care. But a one-time good friend of mine, I just discovered, has been diagnosed with terminal cancer. We had a falling out years ago and never reconciled. Now, I'm surprised at how sad I am. I recall the laughter and friendship, not the anger and feelings of betrayal. The irony is that we most likely agree on all things political. And I hope his doctors are wrong. What does one have to do with the other? Nothing. Not a goddamn thing. Except somewhere, somehow in this fight, I must puzzle out a way to remain human. And I'll end with a longer look into the mirror. Give a boy a gun, and all he wants to do is shoot something. I got a bow and arrow for my 10th birthday, but no target. No rainbow-colored concentric circles taped to a thick bale of straw. So I found my own, a pigeon, poking around between the oaks in the side yard. One shot, and she launched into the air, rising with my arrow in her, 10, 15 feet up, before it fell to the ground, tipped, covered in blood. I cried myself to sleep. But I'm a slow learner, and when Dad gave me the .22 Winchester and turned his 14-year-old son loose near shore on a wild lake in the woods of Ontario, I'm sure he thought I'd shoot cans, lily pads, or trees. But I was a boy with a gun. So when the raven called as it flew overhead, I aimed skyward and pulled the trigger. It was as simple as that. I can still hear the wet smack that sent it crumpling into the shallows. And when the muskrat swam near shore while Randy and I paddled the canoe, I picked up the gun and shot it in the mouth, first try. I was a lucky shot. I fired first and thought later. And even as a young man, when I bought a .44 Magnum for bear protection as we walked trails in the Alaskan wilderness, I spent too much time almost wishing I'd see one. Like I said, I'm a slow learner. It's a good thing I woke up. It's even better I never went into law enforcement. Thank you. Thank you, Holly. And thanks everybody for being here. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Pat. Thank you for your honesty, for your powerful words, for speaking the truth. I must puzzle out a way to remain human. I think that line's going to stick with a lot of us for a long time. Okay, our next reader, I'm going to slip in another quote here because I think this really fits at this point. This is from Maxine Hong Kingston. In a time of destruction, create something. A poem, a parade, a community, a school, a vow, a moral principle, one peaceful moment. I thought that would be a good one to use to introduce Tess Gallagher, because she is the person who I look to for creative responses. And among the many poets that she's mentored, I feel very lucky to be one of them. Tess Gallagher's 11th volume of poetry was published May 2019 by Grey Wolf Press. Midnight Lantern, New and Selected Poems, also from Grey Wolf, is the most comprehensive offering of her poems to date. Other poetry includes Dear Ghosts, Moon Crossing Bridge, and Amplitude. Gallagher's The Man from Kinvara, Selected Stories, was published fall 2009, and these stories are the basis for film episodes which are currently under development. Barnacle Soup, Stories from the West of Ireland, a collaboration with the Sligo storyteller Josie Gray, is available in the US from Carnegie Mellon. Tess spends time in a cottage on Loch Arrow in County Sligo in the west of Ireland, where many of her new poems are set, and also lives and writes in her hometown of Port Angeles, Washington. Please join me in welcoming Tess Gallagher.
Hello, thank you. Thank you so much, Holly. And really very happy to be in the company and hear all the poems and what you have to say also coming up to the poem. And tried to think of something I could say about myself. It's hard to locate yourself sometimes in this rather floating world we're in now at the moment. I guess I think of myself as a poet who occupies a kind of liminal space, like a prolonged hesitation sometimes, like to see out of stillness what is important, what should I respond to? And that has changed over my lifetime and somehow gets harder because after a while you have responded to quite a lot after so many books, so many days. So in this liminal space between light and darkness, there are these rather unpredictable currents of attentiveness where something does rise up and begins to inhabit you. So I seem to spend most of my time waiting to be inhabited. I can't just go with my pen and get the paper. I spend a stupid amount of time really waiting. But it pays off. I have to say, my own opinion, I feel like, wow, I got in there and I found something I can bring back and that others can experience what I found there. The other night I was in Hadlock and Gary Lilly was sitting beside me and we watched a heron land. And I opened the Google and I wanted to see what about this heron. And it is really known for its stillness, its looking around, its hesitation, its deep abiding in its cosmos of water and sky. So I felt really companioned there by that. So I'm going to just read, since I talked so much, my one poem, and it's in the anthology. It has an epigraph from Jaime Sabines, a wonderful Mexican poet. When I met Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu, who directed the great film which was inspired by Raymond Carver, my late husband. It was inspired by his short story and his work in general, I think, because Alejandro loved his work. He gave me as a gift 3 books, and one of them was Taromba, and that was by Jaime Sabines. And I fell in love. I didn't know. Yeah, I had fallen in love with Yeats and other great poets, but I met this Jaime Sabines and I'm on YouTube looking for him. Gosh, I missed him. I'm so sorry. But I'm in love with his poetry. And he said, and this is going to be, a telltale sign about this poem. He said, let's walk arm in arm like 2 jaundiced moles and see if the Lord of Tunnels will guide us. I like the idea of the Lord of Tunnels. And I'm always thinking when I walk on the earth, what is under there? What is going on under there? So that's what this poem is about. It also, I think, you know, we have to engage our humors more because they tell us a lot, and they give us other directions than the normal ones. And we need the round, we need it all. We need the cosmos of our feelings, and our humors are great that way. And that's what I get from Ireland, and a lot from my friends. Thank you, my friends. So this is called In the Too Bright Cafe. The men are comparing killing methods for moles. I'm ashamed to say my ears prick up. Moles have tunneled into my potato patch, erecting fluffy, earth-filtered cathedrals both sides of the fence. What are they up to down there with my baby eye-sprouted potatoes? They could be cousins, potatoes and moles, each turning the earth's darkness into something edible, or a way to achieve what light is always holding back. Once I caught my yard help stomping the dirt over their openings, like putting out underground fire. Gas. The collaborators in eradication are pumping it into tunnels as they drink black coffee and tuck into eggs over easy with hash browns. Don't burn them. Pellets, some kind of poison. They mull this, asking for salsa and Tabasco. Are they sending down heat sinking devices? They just don't say dynamite. I'm begging. A voice by the window claims he heard of a guy who hooked up a loudspeaker and piped in so many decibels the moles popped up like mushrooms, and you didn't have to pick them off with your shotgun because they just kept running. The men are laughing by now, and I'm thinking, they're just talking, right? That merry cash register by the door is ushering a regular out, allowing the moles a brief reprieve. The men wave their friend onto the street as I holster my purse. My sympathies buzz the enormous windows like doomed flies, those reverberating in plain sight in the corners where darkness will fall and everyone above ground will have gone somewhere to sleep, this all off. Me? I'm opening a little cafe of the mind where moles can talk to flies. Intricate labyrinths under the apple trees and glassed-in fantasies of escape at head-high altitudes. Moles paddling through earth or flies foozling the air over steak on a campfire near the ocean. Moles will claim daylight, oxygen, overrated, preferring air filtered by darkness on the run. Flies utter, "What cute snouts you have," and moles have to consider life with wings. By the time I get home, they've unionized and are working out maternity leave and pensions. Above it all, elk antlers wait for tinsel and mistletoe, or tune into moles going on and on, rhapsodic about ants after rain. But because I'm the boss, I interrupt at the top of my smart-ass boss voice. Hey, how about a little respect? Whose cafe is this, anyhow? Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Tess. Oh my goodness. I just love that word foozling and just the image of the moles, all that's going on underneath the ground that you bring so alive to us. I'm also appreciating the serendipity of moving from Pat talking about guns to the men, you know, shooting moles. Yeah, thank you for reminding us of the importance of humor. We need the whole cosmos.
That's right.
So the next and final reader is Gary Copeland Lilly, who is actually coming to us after teaching his workshop tonight. So thank you, Gary, for fitting this into a very full day. Gary Copeland Lilly is the author of 8 books of poetry, the most recent being The Bushman's Medicine Show from Lost Horse Press and a chapbook, The Hog Killing, from Blue Horse Press. He's originally from North Carolina and now lives in the Pacific Northwest. He has received the Washington, D.C. Commission on the Arts Fellowship for Poetry. He has published in numerous anthologies and journals, including Best American Poetry 2014, Willow Springs, The Swamp, Waxwing, the Taos International Journal of Poetry, and the African American Review. And he is a Cave Canem Fellow. Please join me in welcoming Gary Copeland Lilly. Good to have you here, Gary.
How you doing?
Good.
It's good to be here. I want to thank Raven Chronicles and Phoebe and Anna Balint and Anna especially for the invitation to contribute to this anthology, and that was and Thomas. These are hard times. I know we've been talking about that, everybody, and I am a news junkie. But lately, I will get most of my news from the comedians. That seems to be, not that they're not going to give me the bad news, they'll just be fair and honest about it. And that's what we need now. We need a lot of honesty in this world so we can make changes. But I use news sources a lot. And so I wrote a set of poems called the Coyote Poems, which deal with the migration of unwanted. And I'm going to read some of those today. And they're in the anthology. And like I said, they're all about communication sources, newspapers, TV, etc. And how do we get our news? The Small Town Daily. Metro section, page 8, below the fold. Police shooting, Black lab mistaken for coyote. Another fatal shooting of a Black lab Tuesday night, August 2nd, by police officers who had mistaken the congenial family pet for the male coyote being sought as a subject of interest. Police officers were responding to an anonymous tip concerning a suspicious animal that was pursuing a local champion female border collie on Lawrence Street and urinating in multiple locations. The animal was engaged in the latter activity when the police officers arrived. Animal Control Officer Jim Locke, who had responded to the call, stated the animal really didn't give the officers a choice. When the officers pulled up with their flashing red and blue lights and someone had the siren on, the dog tried to bolt. I understand that he was 17 years old, quite elderly, so it was a slow run. There have been 5 fatal domestic dog shootings so far this year, as compared to 2 in the previous year. This incident is unfortunately a tragedy, stated police spokesman Sandy Shaw. The animal refused to obey the officer's commands to stop running and to stop urinating. And fearing for the safety of their fellow officers and for the safety of the community, the officers then employed deadly force. The dog, identified as Buster, was struck 17 times. All 6 officers at the scene discharged their weapons and have been placed on administrative leave. KSIN Sin TV, the pulse of the community. In the wake of the small town police shooting of Buster, who was a victim of mistaken identity and was initially thought to have been a Coyote suspect, research reveals that of the 5 fatal police shootings of domestic dogs this year, 4 of the victims, including Buster, have been black labs. The 5th victim was a chocolate lab. Domestic dog owners are nearly 60% of the small town population. This is the place that has an annual dog parade where there are big dog bowls of water in the local bars where people drive with their dogs sitting in their laps. Domestic dogs have become part of the fabric of this community. This incident has created tensions between the police and the town's citizens. Black lab owners have organized several protests and are demanding to know why their domestic big dogs are targeted and shot. In 17 years, Buster never harmed anyone, and it is very hard for me to believe that he was converting like they say, being that he was so old, stated Joan Malone, owner of the late Buster. Seems like the officers disdain the use of less lethal methods like tasers or sedatives or dog treats. According to a credible source who wishes to remain anonymous, not all of small town domestic dog owners agree with the patrons in the protests, especially owners of the golden members of the breed. Tiring of the negative attention and the increased scrutiny of domestic big dogs in general, as a result of the protests by black lab activists, the golden lab owners have created their own organization, All Labs Matter. Their feeling is that black lab owners need to train their dogs better, and that they state that there are several very good, affordable private schools in the area where this can be done. Any dog that does not sit and roll over when told dies. Police spokesperson Sandy Shaw on department directive concerning domestic big dogs and the expanding threat of coyote terrorism. Domestic big dogs have the ability to ward off coyote attacks and now appear to have formed a cooperative but wary coexistence with the coyote colony, which continues to terrorize the small town community with rampages through the restaurants and grocery stores, and by the kidnapping of cats, pet rabbits, baby goats from the organic farms. Investigators believe that some domestic big dogs may have become the first line in the coyote defense alert systems and bark mayday warnings on the approaches of police and animal control officers. The coyote behaviors that domestic big dogs are adopting include the unabashed copulation with multiple partners, staying in the shadows in shifting locations, and refusing to obey any human commands. That's the news tonight. I'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Gary. Oh my goodness. I don't know where to start with responding to that. I love that. I love the coyote. I'm glad this is a series. Yeah, and I just want to encourage, Gary is our last reader, which means that we have a little bit of time for questions. Oh, first of all, I just am so moved by the diversity of voices. Let's maybe just start out with a quick round of applause for all the readers tonight. So I hope you can hear us across the cyber waves. It's been such a rich mix of poetic voices, tender, fierce, humorous, unrelenting, ironic, passionate, all witnessing, all powerful, each in its own way. And well, the words are settling in. I guess I'll start out with a few questions, but I hope that you'll also join me in asking some questions. Just feel free to put them in the chat. In fact, it looks like people are starting to do that, so that's great. And Gary, I also wanted to mention that, you know, your cat played sort of a cameo role in your poem. That was wonderful. Okay, so I thought I would start with a really general question, and any of the poets can respond. We are so moved by what we've heard tonight. And as a poet, I feel, I guess, a little bit, I'm not unbiased in this, in feeling that poetry is really well suited to witnessing. But I would love to hear what you think, and why do you think that is? Anybody want to weigh in on that? Respond to that? Maybe I'll start calling on people.
Yeah, come on.
Holly, can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, thanks. The question is, you know, what is it about poetry that makes it such a powerful form of witness? Why is poetry specifically so well suited to witnessing? That's what we've heard tonight. We've heard just such powerful witnessing. So who would like to go first? Alice, please.
I think one thing is that poetry is based on emotion, and therefore it can really deliver a very moving comment or comment on what's happening in society. I also think because it's personalized, the best poems tonight, in my opinion, were those that are really have a lot of specific detail that draws us right into the situation. And we're experiencing the thing that's being talked about in the poem. And I think that's why poetry is so effective at witnessing.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Alice. Anybody want to add to that?
I think it's so immediate that that it has this energy that comes to it, because like poetry is distilled language to me, and that means that everything is like, it has the energy right from the start. It's able to pull people in. It's able to get to the details quickly, and it's the way it's an emotional thing that we kind of tap into, that we have to speak and give our view, express ourselves about it.
Yeah.
Ollie, I think it's the images speak loudly, and you can see them and they're vibrant. And just quoting from my own poem, politicians levitating on bandwagons, swerving on and off a broken highway of 8 million bones. It's the image of that you can see, and you get the message quite clearly.
Yeah, absolutely, Larry. Thank you for repeating that powerful line and image. I mean, I think we're all leaving this night carrying some of these images that you've all given us. So definitely the power of the image, the power of the emotion. And I think, you know, I mean, I guess one of the things that kind of came out for me tonight is just the truth telling. You know, when he switched to his last two poems and said, I'm just going to tell the truth here. That is so moving for all of us to receive that, Pat. Thank you. That's an incredible gift. And I think that now, at this time when there's a deficit of truth in the world, I almost feel like it's up to the poets to try to make up for it. And that's what I'm hearing tonight. That's so reassuring to me. I guess one other question I had, thank you all for your responses. Actually, Tess, did you want to add anything to that before we move on?
Well, I just think that we can be just sleepwalking if we're not making poetry, and we are waking each other up. We're trying to wake up those around us to what is important. And we're trying to stir them. I mean, that's why poets are always considered dangerous, because we can make you feel things with words. And we're very, very dangerous. But in this America so far, they didn't quite notice us. And we are very lucky in that regard. And we hope that's not coming next. But, you know, I take it as a power, and I've always felt grateful that I have this power to speak and speak freely. And I always wanted to be heard. I always wanted my poetry to be read and to join the company. And I'm so proud to be in this company. I'm proud to be in my Irish company as well, and to be in the community and the fervor of poetry being written since I'm, you know, about 14. Now, getting younger and younger.
Oh, Tess, I love being reminded that poets are dangerous. Yeah, I mean, throughout history, artists are the ones who sound the alarm, you know, and that's what we are being called to do right now. This week, I listened to Margaret Atwood's recent town hall talk. I bet some of you might have heard that. And she was asked by Cheryl Strayed about the future she creates in her books, of course, The Handmaid's Tale, and her more recent book, The Testaments. And this was her response. I create these futures because I hope they won't happen. We can change the future by how we behave today. The future isn't set in stone, it's up to us. And I guess after reading Margaret Atwood's work, I was really surprised a little bit by that response. And I also felt that it was a call. It was a call to all of us. And I'd love to hear how other people respond to those words. Anybody, Pat?
Yeah, I was going to respond also to your last question. I think the same thing's true. I think that one of the things that poets do and artists do is they connect dots that aren't necessarily connected by other people, and we each have our own truth and look at it from our own perspective. But I think that drawing connections between things that aren't necessarily thought of, you know. I have a good friend, Holly, you know her, Joanne Clarkson, said to me once that she loves reading poetry because she always likes being surprised and at the way people think. And I think, you know, we speak a lot in metaphor as well. And when we do that, I think that allows people to think critically and connect the dots themselves that we're putting together for them or guiding them towards. And so yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. So there you go.
Good. Thank you, Pat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sharon, I didn't get a chance to ask you about that other question. Do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I had a question from the feed.
Oh, good.
People wanted to know what our poets are reading for inspiration. Several people made comments about the different voices that everybody had, the different points of view, and they wanted to know what they were reading to inspire them at the moment through these difficult times. People wanted to respond to that.
Who would like to go first?
Well, I'm reading Jericho Brown right now, his traditions, and also I'm starting to read a lot of short fiction as well. Edward P. Jones, Lost in the City, that one.
Great. I want to come back to fiction, but let's hear what other people are reading. Thank you, Gary. Pat, what about you? What are you reading?
I'm currently reading a book by Lucille Clifton, the Blessing of the Boats.
Oh, wonderful.
Awesome book.
Yeah. Good. And Tess, what are you reading? I know you've got many books going generally.
I do. I've got a bag over there. I was just wishing it was within reach. But I'm really reading the Dalai Lama right now, a book called Becoming Enlightened, and thinking about all the challenges of just even the title. And yeah, and I've been reading another book in which he figures in, and that's about him talking to neuroscientists and talking about the mind and how he thinks of the mind and the body relationship, and how they use, you know, their language is his, you know, kind of start to touch each other before the book is out. The wonderful book, and to see that he's so interested and he's willing to change his mind about things, and he's also affecting their thinking.
Mhm. Great. Oh, good. It's always good to be reminded of the Dalai Lama. That sounds wonderful. Yeah. Anybody else? Larry, what are you reading now?
Oh, I'm reading a graphic novel. It's called Displacement, and it's about someone who does kind of like time travel back to their relatives who were incarcerated during World War II in a concentration camp. And she and I are presenting. And so I'm reading my book as well, because I'm presenting my book with her book. So my book is, and this is a shameless, whatever ad that isn't showing up on the TV, I guess.
There it is.
There it is. Yeah.
My name is not Viola.
Yeah.
And so I'm rereading that because I'm going to be presenting with this woman regarding her graphic novel, and her name is Kiku Hughes.
Oh, wow. Oh, great. Yeah, and I do want to come back to fiction if we have time, because that's one of my questions, but I want to ask Alice what she's reading first. Alice, are you? Yeah, you need to unmute yourself. There. Let's see. Alice, we're not hearing you. Can you unmute?
Okay, there I am.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, I never have any of my authors marshaled when it's time to answer these questions, even though I have the books in my heart, so it's always tough. But I never quit reading Tess Gallagher. That is sort of my guiding light in poetry. Ellen Bryant Voigt is another voice that I keep close to me always. The selected poems are Messenger. I've also been reading, with Gary's help, some of the African-American poets I might not have known, Jericho Brown for one, and then Tracy K. Smith.
Mhm.
And I'm trying to think of the other woman, but I won't be able to think of it. Toy Derricotte has always been a guiding light for me in the African-American voices.
Yeah.
So that's poetry. If you're coming back to fiction later, we'll do that then.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sharon, what about you? Do you want to say what you're reading now too?
Sure, I've been having a binge. I read Tess's new book, of course, and Jericho Brown, Natalie Diaz's new book, Natasha Trowethy's new book. I just went on. I just couldn't stop. Yeah, I'm full. Not really. I'm filling. They were wonderful, all of them. Yeah.
Oh.
Thank you, Sharon. That's the book the author is trying to think of. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Is that Natasha Trethewey's memoir, or is it her poetry?
Her poetry. I've got the memoir on order.
Yeah, I've been wanting to read her memoir too. Yeah, good. Good.
I found my books. This is the one I wanted to tell you about. This poet. He's Scottish, and his name is Norman McCaig, and he's really fantastic. And he was given to me by a filmmaker who's working with my short stories for film. But he's fantastic. Look how big this book is. It's worth every cent I paid for. I didn't pay for it because he gave to me, but if I had paid for it, it would have been worth it. And this is, I keep this on my bed because it's a lot of short poems by Rizos in translation. And I recommend them because they're kind of morsely. They're just kind of yummy to follow, you know, follow your day. I have a student who got his first book. I've been reading him. And he was from my teaching in Walla Walla, Justin Gardner, Naming the Lifeboat. And I'm always reading the Essential Zen, trying to catch hold of it. You know, you have to read it again and again and miss it and get it once in a while. So there, now I'm better acquitted.
Oh, good, good. Thank you.
I do want to also mention the new book by Claudia Rankine, which is just wonderful, Just Us.
Yes.
Just amazing.
Yeah.
So I just can really recommend that to anyone.
Good. I've been reading I've been trying to read more Indigenous writers, and Jennifer Forster is a poet I've been really admiring, and Sherwin Bitsui. And I know there are many more in our own region that I look forward to reading. Yeah, and I'm just noticing the time. Phoebe, how are we doing?
It's 9 o'clock.
It's 9 o'clock. I think that means we need to wrap up, as hard as it is to do. We just are getting going. But I think the Zoom, what is it? The Zoom police will come after us if we go over?
No, no, that's not true.
That's not true. Okay. Okay, we can go over a little bit. But yeah, I guess I'm just reluctant to draw this to a close, but I do have a couple more quotes. And I think Phoebe told me that it was Anna Balint who found all these great quotes. And I think I'll just share a couple more, just as a way of kind of sending us off into the night together. This is one by Arundhati Roy. Another world is not only possible, she is on her way. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. And I think that goes back to our question earlier about poetry and maybe the silences in poetry, you know, in that sense that we have to slow down enough to really listen. And I had another one here. I just have to find it. Okay, Grace Paley. Let us go forth with fear and courage and rage to save the world. I thought that would be a good one to end on.
It is.
So, speaking for at one time we had 100 viewers here. So speaking for those viewers and for all of you who will be watching the recording, thank you to the poets for sharing your powerful words, your hearts, your honesty, yourselves with us tonight, for inspiring us and reminding us what matters when it's so easy to be caught up in the deluge of news. And to our viewers, thank you for being part of our Zoom Peace March. Here's one thing we can all do. We can support our writers and our artists and our small presses for speaking up. You can buy this book from your local independent bookstore or directly from Raven Chronicles. This is my shameless pitch for Raven Chronicles, and we hope you'll join us in continuing this march against hate in whatever way you feel called to do so. So thank you. Someone just held up the book for me. Thank you.
That was me.
I see lots of books being held up. Maybe we can all just hold up the book as a final farewell. So we'll all do what we can to take this book out into the wider world, right? Okay. So thank you again to Phoebe. Thank you to Raven Chronicles. Thank you to all of our readers tonight. Go forth and save the world.
Thank you.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Holly,
Yeah.
Could you and Kathy, the tech person, stay after everyone else leaves? Okay.
Sure. Okay.
Thank you, everybody. Could you all leave the meeting now?